Political observers can often identify the mood and pulse of an election long before the first ballot has been cast. If the pulse is calm, then the party in power is more likely to win in the upcoming election. But if there's a disturbance in the force, then the mood of the electorate swings to demanding change. Mark, with inflation rising to unheard of levels and the economy staggering as a result, polls in Maryland suggest that Marylanders are not agitated or demanding change this year. What is your sense about the electorate here in Maryland this year?
Well, nationwide, and I think it applies to Maryland as well, you really have two distinct currents of issues. And one is, of course, the economic issues that you've described. But then there is also a cluster of other issues, abortion, January 6th, a whole range of issues. And during the past couple of months, they've ebbed and flowed very back. They seem to be coming back towards economic issues, but I think it's important to kind of take into account that which is the dominant issue seems to have a huge impact on the way people come out in the election.
Well, I'll follow up with you for a second. I mean, the Republicans nationwide seem to be emphasizing rising crime, and they also seem to be, the inflation issue. Whereas as Democrats, herald the fact that President Biden has increased the number of jobs and has steadied the economy to a certain extent. We're not seeing any agitation here in Maryland. I don't know, but I'm not quite sure why.
Yeah, I would say we forget that the General Assembly has, really great approval ratings. And I think the Maryland electorate, they do see our state delegations across the counties to be effective. I think the bipartisanship with, Larry Hogan and the legislature, I think, and then their response to the pandemic, I think does show the psychology of the Maryland electorate, which I would say is in huge contrast with how we feel about national elections.
Well, I'm going to go back to Mark. Mark, the Baltimore Sun, ran an article last week with the headline, "Voters Uncertain Whether the Next Maryland Governor Can Allay Their Kitchen Table Economic Concerns." Now, Maricé points out that the General Assembly is getting high ranks, but this suggests that voters are resigned to the fact that political leaders have failed them.
Well, I think we'll talk about it. I think there's actually a great deal that it can be done at the state level on economic issues. And I think we're going to talk about some of the issues in terms of energy policy that are going to impact on that. And certainly taxes and support for business and on regulation, those all have a huge impact on the state of the economy in Maryland.
Maricé, you were part of the General Assembly. I mean, this new leadership in the General Assembly seems to have swung dramatically to the left, especially on criminal justice issues. Are Maryland really ready for these changes?
Absolutely. Casey, I would say, having the first Black female Speaker of the House, I think not only, being a historic event, it really shows the change and the femininity, if I may, that we are seeing in our leaders and seeing our economic agenda really, being affected by who are our leaders. And going back to the Westmore situation, I think this idea that he doesn't understand, kitchen table issues. I think it's a failed attempt to make him to look as if he were, an elitist, et cetera, which this is not, it's not a brand new trick in the book. If we hear a little bit about Westmore's upbringing, his father died when he was 3 years old, was raised by a single mother. And listen, it's somebody who, was able to basically fight for a good future for himself. And now he wants to have that prosperity here in the state of Maryland.
Well, but I'd like to go back to the article in the Baltimore Sun, where people not only are worried about the economics of their pocketbooks and what they call the kitchen table issues, but they're also concerned about crime. Crime is rising, not just in Baltimore City and surrounding Baltimore, but here in Montgomery County, we've seen a staggering uptick in violent crime and in nonviolent crime with break-ins and cars and shootings. So, I mean, I think there's a growing unease, and if our political leaders aren't cognizant of this, they're going to be in for a surprise. coming up? Either one of you can address those issues. Mark?
Oh, well, I absolutely agree. I think crime is an issue that, whereas once it may have been thought of as being something about other parts from our Montgomery County residents somewhere else in the state, is very much front and center as an issue. Carjack, I mean, you look at the various numbers, things that really disturb people are increasing. And I think there's a concern that some of this has to do with the pushback towards what the role of police department should be and the amount of support that they have. And I think that, as you say, that I think this is a concern that really resonates with voters.
I agree, Casey. I mean, I've, as a criminal defense attorney, former legislator, recently a candidate, I canvassed 16,000 doors, and absolutely, I mean, crime is on the rise. I see that as an effect more so of the economy, but also, and I do have to address, and then that's why I actually had the support of the FOP on this, is that the morale is incredibly low. I think that we have an opportunity in Montgomery County, hopefully, if we, pressure, some members of the county council in understanding that, this whole campaign against the police, I mean, it's narrow-minded, and it's insensitive and it's disrespectful, because I know a lot of the officers whom I have wonderful relationships with in the courtroom, et cetera. And we need to inspire the next generation of Montgomery County youth to want to become law enforcement officers in their neighborhoods. It makes a difference when somebody who has grown up, you see, you're, oh, that's my high school friend from 20 years ago. You're going to treat your neighbors in a different way. So I think it's not, I don't think it's a product so much of some of the criminal justice reform bills, because we already had those laws coming from Annapolis. It's more so thinking about what kind of future we want to build here in the county so that we can inspire the next generation of law enforcement officers.
Well, I think that's admirable that we have that as a goal. But the fact is, the last recruiting class we had for our police force was pathetically low, and not only in terms of numbers, but also, frankly, in the quality of the candidates that wanted to go there. I mean, this harkens back to the 70s when there was a dramatic shift. Maybe it's a generational shift, but we need to make an effort, as you suggest, to recruit from within the county. Mark, I'll let you have the last word. We got about 60 seconds.
Well, I absolutely agree with everything that's being said. I think it's important to recognize that in an emergency situation, there's certainly a role for various social services, what have you, but it's also an important role to have a safe and secure environment in which those services can be brought to bear. And that really requires, in many cases, police officers. And I think there's a disconnect when people think that somehow there's going to be some other social intervention that's going to solve an issue that's really a crisis, and where safety needs to be given more consideration.
We talk a lot about the economic conditions of the county, and we talk a lot about the safety of the county. But if we don't have a safe environment, people are not going to want to live here and locate their businesses here, regardless of whether they think the county is business friendly or not. So we've got to do a better effort in making sure our county is safe.